You've probably had this happen to you before. You're playing your favorite game and your FPS counter is showing a nice solid 120 FPS. And yet the game still stutters. Little hitches and micro freezes, and it drives you nuts. In this video, I'm going to show you why that happens and more importantly, how to actually fix it. Welcome back to STRK Tech. Today we are going to talk about one of the most frustrating things in PC gaming, and that is stuttering.
Did I stutter?
It's incredibly annoying and can truly ruin an otherwise great gaming experience. We'll be going over some of the most common causes of stuttering and explain what is actually happening under the hood. Also make sure to stick around until the end because I'll be going over a step-by-step checklist to help you reduce stutter in your games. Now let's start with what stutter actually is, because that is where a lot of people get confused.
Most people look at FPS and think high FPS equals smooth and low FPS equals stutter. But that is not how it works. Stutter is almost always about frame time. Frame time is the time it takes to draw each individual frame. If one frame takes 7 milliseconds, the next takes 9, and then suddenly one takes 45, you get a hitch, even if your average FPS is still high. So in this video, every cause we talk about is basically something that suddenly makes one frame take way longer than the other frames. Now let's go through the most common reasons this happens and how you can actually fix them.
Before touching any graphic settings or blaming your hardware, start with your GPU driver. This is one of the most common causes of stutter and also one of the easiest things to fix. Drivers don't just affect raw FPS, they also control shader caching, scheduling and how frames are being queued. If a driver is buggy, corrupted or just a bad match overall for a specific game, you can get perfectly fine FPS with terrible frame pacing nonetheless. So, first thing you do is update your GPU driver to a current stable version. If you're stuttering, start it after the driver update, roll back one version and test. If things feel inconsistent across multiple games, do a clean install of the driver. This step alone has fixed stuttering for a lot of people, especially in newer releases. Next up is memory stability. XMP or Expo profiles are memory overclocks for Intel and AMD respectively. They increase memory speed and bandwidth, which can improve performance, but they also reduce stability margins. And here's the key point. RAM can be mostly stable and still cause stutter. Games are extremely sensitive to tiny memory errors, and when those happen, the system has to retry operations and that affects frame times, not necessarily FPS. The result is random hitches that are very hard to explain if you only look at averages. So first try disabling XMP or Expo in your BIOS and then boot into Windows and test your game again. If the stutter is gone, congratulations, you've just identified a stability issue. At that point, you have a couple of options. You can either leave XMP off or try a lower memory speed. If disabling XMP or Expo fixes stutter, a BIOS update can sometimes also restore stability at higher speeds. Uncapped FPS with your GPU running at 99% all the time. When your FPS is completely uncapped, your GPU is sprinting. It is trying to push as many frames as physically possible. That sounds great, but the moment the game throws a slightly heavy frame at it, there is zero headroom. That one frame suddenly takes much longer and you see it as a stutter. Here's what you can try. If you're using a 144Hz monitor for example, cap your FPS slightly below that, say 141 FPS. This gives the GPU a small timing buffer to finish each frame before the next refresh cycle starts, instead of running flat out every time. You can set this cap using a good in-game limiter, or with tools like RTSS using the frame rate limit option, or directly through your GPU driver settings. And if your system can't constantly hit your refresh rate, cap to what it can hold in the worst case scenario. This alone can make a big difference. Your GPU isn't constantly maxed out and frame times become noticeably more stable. If your GPU usage looks fine but the game still stutters, the CPU is often the real bottleneck. Not average CPU usage, but short spikes on the main game thread. A lot of games rely heavily on one core to handle things like AI, physics, draw calls and game logic. If that thread suddenly gets overloaded for a single frame, everything stalls. The GPU waits, frame time spikes and you see a stutter. On top of that, Windows loves to pile on background activity. Launchers, browsers, RGB software, overlays, update services. Each one can add tiny interruptions that break frame consistency. First, try lowering CPU heavy settings. Settings such as view distance, crowd density, shadows and foliage are CPU heavy, just to name a few. These don't always affect FPS much, but they reduce CPU load at least to some degree. Second, try killing all background noise. close browsers with a lot of tabs, and disable overlays like Steam, Xbox Game Bar, and Viva Tuner if you don't need them. Third, check your thermals and clock behavior. If your CPU is hitting thermal limits and briefly downclocking, that can cause stutter even when FPS stays high. Also watch CPU clocks under load. If they are bouncing around, improving your cooling or airflow might be the real fix. Now let's talk about VRAM, but in the right context. Running out of VRAM usually doesn't crash your FPS, but it will affect your smoothness. Modern games constantly stream in textures, geometry and effects as you move through the world. If your VRAM is close to full, the engine starts shuffling data between VRAM, system RAM, and sometimes even your SSD. That shuffling is slow. And when it happens mid-frame, you get stutters when you're turning quickly, entering new areas, or during busy scenes. This is why games can look fine standing still, but stutter the moment you start moving. The fix to this is one that is quite simple. Just try to lower the quality of your graphics in-game. Ultra textures are one of the biggest VRAM killers and often give diminishing visual returns anyway. High resolution plus ultra textures on lower VRAM cards is a recipe for disaster. Even with enough VRAM, games still rely heavily on storage and shader compilation. Open world games constantly stream assets as you move. If a game is installed on a slow drive or if your storage is busy, those reads take longer and show up as traversal stutter. Shader compilation is another big one. If a shader hasn't been compiled yet and the game needs it right now, the frame stalls while that shader is being built. That's the classic first time hitch when entering a new area or seeing an effect for the first time. Always try to install your games on your SSD. HDDs will cause asset streaming stutters no matter how high your FPS is. Also try to avoid heavy disk activity while gaming. Large downloads, file transfers, or background updates can interfere with streaming. Finally, test different APIs if available. Some games simply behave better on DX11 and others on DX12 or Vulkan. It's worth testing if stutter persists. And finally, an important reality check. Some games simply have engine level stutter that you simply cannot fully fix. If everyone reports it, it's probably not your system. Alright, now let's turn all of this into something practical. If your game stutters, even though FPS looks fine, troubleshoot in the following order. Step 1. Update or roll back your GPU driver. Do a clean install if things feel inconsistent. Step number 2. Disable XMP or Expo and test if the stutter disappears. If so, you found a memory stability issue. Step number 3. Capture FPS and leave some headroom. Stable frame times beat maximum FPS any time of the day. Step 4. Reduce CPU spikes, check thermals and power behavior. Lower CPU heavy settings, close background apps and disable overlays. Make sure CPU and GPU clocks aren't bouncing due to heat or power limits. Step 5. Watch VRAM usage and adjust textures. Lower texture quality if you're near the VRAM limit. And step number 6. Use a fast SSD and let shaders compile. Avoid HDDs and background disk activity for modern games. Also, don't forget to test after each step. If you change everything all at once, you won't know what actually fixed your stutter. Now, if you take one thing away from this video, let it be this. High FPS doesn't mean smooth gameplay. Stable frame times do. Once you start thinking in frame times instead of FPS, PC performance makes a lot more sense. Run through the checklist, change one thing at a time, and most stutter problems can be easily fixed. Now, if this saves you some frustration, drop a comment and consider subscribing. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.